Hello, everyone. I'm Roseanne Cook, one of the facilitators of Potluck Insurgency. We are a local grassroots group here in Johnson County. We got started in January of 2017, and since then we've been meeting almost monthly, often at a house party, to connect Democrats with candidates and issues. We've done many meet and greets for candidates, fundraisers. We've had many speakers on issues and have just really done as much as we can to build awareness around issues and to help elect Democrats. This presentation tonight is about gun safety, and in particular about public measure number 1. Measure, it'll be on our ballot this fall, on the back of the ballot as a proposed amendment to the Iowa Constitution. And we would like to do everything we can to ensure that voters are well educated about the content and the import of this particular amendment so that they are prepared to vote on it. So tonight we've invited Temple Hyatt to do this presentation. She is a longtime gun violence prevention advocate and activist, a veteran of the first Gulf War and a resident of Iowa for over 40 years. Temple's personal experience of gun suicide by a member of her family informs her understanding of the sensible steps that we can take to prevent gun violence. So I'd very much like to welcome Temple and thank her for doing this presentation this evening. Temple?
Thank you, Roseanne. As you mentioned, in November of 2022, Iowans will vote on a proposed amendment to the Iowa Constitution for the first time since 2010. Supporters call this amendment the Right to Firearms Amendment and describe it as the addition of the Second Amendment to Iowa's Constitution. In this presentation, you will learn why this description is misleading. Many public safety interest groups are recommending the public vote no. These groups represent public health, gun safety, gun violence prevention, domestic violence intervention, and religious groups. The content you're going to hear today has been created by volunteers in the gun violence prevention movement. While we did get some input from those in the legal profession, we are not lawyers. If you have questions about the gun violence statistics and methodology, please visit everystat.org. Today, we'll take a look at gun violence in Iowa, along with the legislative changes over the last 5 years that have weakened Iowa's gun safety laws. Then we'll review the ballot measure language and its potential impact based on what we've seen happen in the 3 other states that currently have a similar version of this amendment. And at the end, I hope you have a deeper understanding of why this proposed amendment is not simply the Second Amendment, but a more extreme version. I'd like to highlight a couple of gun violence demographics. In 2020, guns were the second leading cause of death among children and teens in Iowa. Only motor vehicles caused more deaths. Nationwide, firearms are now the leading cause of death for children and teens. Black people are disproportionately impacted by gun violence here in Iowa and are 16 times more likely than white people to die by gun homicide. Black children and teens are 6 times more likely than their white peers to die by guns. Overall, gun violence costs Iowa $2 billion each year. This cost includes state medical care, first responders, ambulances, police, and criminal justice services related to gun violence. The good news is Iowa has the 42nd highest rate of gun deaths in the US. The bad news is this rate was lower and it continues to climb. Last year, we were ranked 43rd. The chart on the right is a graph of Iowa's rate of gun deaths per 100,000 people. From 2011 to 2020, Iowa's rate of gun deaths increased 56%. However, nationwide, this increase was only 33%. During the same time period, Iowa's rate for gun suicide nearly tripled the national rate. Our rate for gun homicide more than doubled the national rate. Again, further statistics, references, and methodology on this data can be found at everystat.org. The bottom line is that Iowa is trending at an alarmingly higher rate than the national average. Many believe this is due in large part to the weakening of Iowa's gun safety laws. In 2017, Iowa passed a stand your ground law, which removed the duty to retreat before using force in self-defense. Stand your ground laws allow people to shoot to kill in public, even when they can safely walk away from the danger. In 2020, Iowa passed a preemptive law that effectively forced the removal of gun safety laws. Locally, firearms are permitted in municipal and county spaces. A child visiting the library could open an adult's purse for a piece of gum and instead find a loaded handgun. This preemptive law also prevents cities and counties from passing future gun safety laws, like the law recently passed in San Jose, California, that requires gun owners to purchase liability insurance. And due to the removal of Iowa's permitting laws in 2021, a firearm can be purchased without a background check and carried in public without demonstrating any proficiency or that they've even fired the gun. This is not an all-encompassing presentation. Unfortunately, there are many factors in Iowa that contribute to gun violence. However, the passage of these laws didn't reduce gun violence. They've simply allowed more guns in public spaces. The passage of these laws is not unique to Iowa. In fact, it's part of a larger trend across the nation. For example, as of January, 20 states already have permitless carry laws, and 12 more are actively pushing to allow people to carry concealed handguns without a permit, training, or background check. Responsible gun owners, law enforcement, and the majority of Americans all oppose permitless carry. You can learn more about this dangerous trend at everytownresearch.org. This is the language for the United States Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In order to place a proposed amendment to the Iowa Constitution on the ballot, it must pass 2 successive General Assemblies. Let's take a closer look at the actual language that was passed. The ballot will read, "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The sovereign state of Iowa affirms and recognizes this right to be a fundamental individual right. Any and all restrictions of this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny." This is not the Second Amendment. The addition of this phrase, "any and all restrictions of this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny," is not in the US Constitution. Strict scrutiny is what makes this proposed amendment very different and very extreme. So what is strict scrutiny and how will it potentially change things? Very simply, strict scrutiny is a legal test. It is the highest level of scrutiny a court can use to decide whether a law is unconstitutional. Under this amendment, judges would be forced to use an unusually stringent standard of review when considering legal challenges to any restrictive gun law. University of Iowa law professor Todd Pettis said strict scrutiny is a common constitutional standard of review to determine if individual rights are being violated. When a court applies strict scrutiny, the courts are demanding a compelling justification for interfering with these individual rights. Iowa Senator Julian Garrett believes, despite current federal law, some judges have ruled, in his view, against that right. He said this proposed amendment protects that right even further because we've learned over the years that not all judges respect the intent of the people that wrote the Second Amendment. Only a few states have adopted this extreme approach. Louisiana passed their amendment in 2012. Alabama and Missouri followed in 2014. This extreme approach would invite frivolous litigation, undermine decades of case law in the state courts, and put in jeopardy many moderate, common sense gun laws. Here's an example. Iowa currently doesn't allow felons to possess firearms, nor do these three states. Louisiana, Alabama, and Missouri all had their felon in possession laws challenged by defendants multiple times in courts. Further, Missouri taxpayers spent millions defending their existing laws against felons seeking protection under this extreme version of the Second Amendment. Polls show that the majority of Iowa voters, including gun owners, are in favor of Iowa's sensible restrictions on the purchase and use of firearms. Iowa's current laws keep felons from having firearms, keep perpetrators of domestic violence from having firearms, keep guns out of schools, and keep restrictions on machine guns and other offensive weapons. These are the types of laws, if challenged under this extreme version of the Second Amendment, might be declared unconstitutional. Iowa Representative Stephen Holt sponsored the resolution and moments before the legislation passed the House, ended his closing statement. Thank you to the United States Marine Corps and John Wayne for teaching me that for law-abiding citizens, the most effective gun control is a firm grip and a steady hand. Again, under this proposed amendment, judges would be forced to use an unusually narrow standard of review when considering legal challenges to any gun safety law. This narrow application could then be used by our legislature when considering future gun laws. Here are a few to consider. Iowa does not have a secure storage law. Many states have laws that require firearms to be stored, locked, unloaded, and separate from ammunition. Massachusetts has one, and they are ranked 51st with one of the lowest rates of gun deaths in the US. Iowa does not have a red flag law. Red flag laws allow loved ones or law enforcement to intervene by petitioning a court for an order to temporarily prevent someone in crisis from accessing guns. These laws are effective because when a person is in crisis and considering harming themselves or others, family members and law enforcement are often the first people to see the warning signs. And Iowa no longer requires permitting. However, nearly 70% of Iowans, including gun owners, supported Iowa's permitting law. If we're ever in a position to reinstate a permitting law or consider other gun safety laws, it's quite possible they would be declared unconstitutional under this amendment. And that's the point. The point of this is to restrict future gun control bills. This is from Iowa State Senator Jason Schultz, who supports the ballot measure. I mentioned earlier that Iowa ranks 42nd for rate of gun deaths in the United States. This is what gun violence looks like in the 3 states with a similar amendment. According to everystat.org, Missouri has the 5th highest rate of gun deaths in the US. Louisiana has the 3rd highest rate, and Alabama has the 4th highest rate. This includes all gun deaths, homicide, suicide, unintentional shootings, police shootings, along with undetermined deaths. A recent CNN article reported on a study that found that there is a direct correlation in states with weaker gun laws and higher rates of gun deaths. Iowa Senator Kevin Kinney is a 28-year veteran of law enforcement and spoke against this proposed amendment. Not many of you have ever had to sit and look down the barrel of a gun. I have on a number of occasions. When you are placing strict scrutiny into the Constitution, you're going to be diminishing our laws that are on the books. To me, this is going to make law enforcement more dangerous. Let's look at the other groups that lobbied against the passage of this proposed amendment. As I mentioned in the beginning, voting no on this extreme version of the Second Amendment aligns you with this broad group that lobbied against the proposed ballot measure. These groups represent gun safety, gun violence prevention, public safety, public health, women's health and safety, religious faiths, and the League of Women Voters of Iowa. Leslie Carpenter is the founder of Iowa Mental Health Advocacy and lobbied against the proposed ballot measure. She has an adult son with a schizoaffective disorder and has been very open about her family's challenges with access to mental health services here in Iowa. She works to educate legislatures and law enforcement about implementing successful programs operating in other parts of the country. Leslie states, extreme risk protection orders, also known as red flag laws, have proven to reduce suicides in other states, as temporary removal of guns is the #1 way to prevent suicide by gun. As a serious brain disorders advocate, my first concern with the proposed ballot measure is that it would prevent life-saving gun legislation like this in Iowa. Connie Ryan is the executive director of the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, another organization that lobbied against the proposed amendment. It goes far beyond what the Second Amendment does. It really would do great potential damage to the laws that we have in this state that responsible gun owners want to have to keep that balance of rights and public health and safety. The proposed amendment on the ballot is not the Second Amendment. The language, any and all restrictions of this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny, makes this an extreme approach that will invite frivolous litigation and will most certainly put in jeopardy Iowa's current and future gun safety laws. Under this proposed amendment, judges would be forced to use an unusually stringent standard of review when considering legal challenges to any restrictive gun law. This proposed amendment won't make Iowa safer. Representative Beth Wessel-Kroschel said, the amendment would likely take down every reasonable gun law in Iowa if it raises the standard beyond the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The current language in the U.S. Constitution regarding the Second Amendment already protects the right to bear arms, and the strict scrutiny language is unnecessary. Every American should have the freedom to be safe in our homes, neighborhoods, and communities. Freedom to live our lives without the constant threat of gun violence hanging over our heads. When you hear news outlets reporting the ballot measure as just the Second Amendment, please correct them. Strict scrutiny isn't in the U.S. Constitution, and it goes beyond the Second Amendment. Make sure they are reporting on the impact this extreme approach will have on current and future gun safety laws. I'd like to share this information with others, and I'm happy to present this again and again to anyone that's interested. You can educate friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, share this with church groups, civic groups, any groups that participate in canvassing and phone banking efforts. Ballot measures are very difficult to defeat, and as we've seen today, the language is oftentimes misleading. Many voters do not turn the ballot over or simply refrain from voting for fear of voting the wrong way. And with supporters calling this effort the Freedom Amendment and promoting it as just the Second Amendment, we have our work cut out for us. So at the very least, vote no on November 8th. And if you'd like to do more, invite others to attend future presentations. Hold the media accountable. Remember, this is not the Second Amendment. Write a letter to the editor. Hold a presentation with your club or volunteer group. Ask related organizations to approve a statement or pass a resolution opposing this ballot measure. And if you're on Twitter, tweet using the IALegis hashtag. Many of the groups that lobbied against this amendment, along with their supporters, have formed a coalition called Iowans for Responsible Gun Laws. They believe this amendment puts the right to carry a gun above the right to safety. We must defeat the reckless gun amendment that would prohibit responsible gun laws in Iowa. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America is a nonprofit, nonpartisan grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. There are several communities here in Iowa that have active groups, and you can text Iowa to 64433 to sign a petition opposing Public Measure 1. You can find more information about upcoming events online at this website. And if you'd like to donate directly to the Iowa chapter to help this group defeat the reckless gun amendment, there's a QR code and the link. So thank you for your time today in listening to this presentation and learning more about Public Measure 1.